Hello everybody and welcome. A very warm welcome to the first video of our academy.
Yeah.
Move and Breathe. So this is a part of a bigger project. So welcome to this amazing masterclass on crow pose. With me there is Patrick.
Hi guys, welcome.
So we are pretty much the founder of the academy. So you will see more from us in terms of courses, classes and trainings, teacher trainings. But for today, what you sign up for is more information on your crow pose. So with no further ado, let's dive into this amazing arm balance that we see a lot coming in our classes and can be considered one of the foundation.
It is a foundational arm balance for all the other arm balances to come.
Yes, exactly. So, but before we start to dive into this particular arm balance, please make sure that you have with you a couple of props. We have here a bolster or like a pillow, anything you might need to protect your face from toppling over. Blocks, potentially 4, but also 2 will do enough. If you have a strap at home, you can use it. We will just trim down what can be used the strap and also what can be the pros and cons to use a strap. So when we speak about things like crow pose, we have to do first a very big distinction. So what we call crow and what we call crane. So when we are in class, we hear a lot of times the Bakasana, and because for mainstream, I would say like yoga, Bakasana is frequently associated with crow pose. While if we look really in the word Baka in Sanskrit, it comes to common crane. So it's a different pose. What you do normally in class that involves a bend in the elbow is called Kakasana, where Kaka means common crow. So we will start to speak about the crow pose. For crow pose, there is a lot going on into your body. And we can start with legs, hips, torso, arms and neck. So we will put here, you can see a little bit of information of all the muscles that are involved in your Kakasana. So what you will see in red is essentially what needs to be engaged. What you will see in blue is what is stretched. And what you see in purple actually is doing both. So it's engaged and stretched at the same time. If we go a little bit through the muscle into your body, if we start with the legs, a lot of times when we are in any arm balance, we see pointed toes. So we have like the flexors that are engaged. So that gives this feeling of lifting. At the same time, we have this squeeze at the back of our calves that involves all the muscles pretty much that you have into your calves to squeeze in. When we look into the hips, there is a big compression, right? So tons of muscles that are involved into the hip compression, tensor fasciae latae, the bicep femoris, all these muscles that are like helping you to lift. And at the same time, there is on the other side, the vastus lateralis that is having a stretch. So you can see here into the photo. When we look into our torso, a lot of things is happening at the back of our spine. We have to protract our shoulders and we have to lift away from the ground. So a couple of things that comes is like quadratus lumboris and one very important muscle that is the serratus anterior. Why? Because this one is really our lifting muscle. Patrick is showing you what is placed into your body. And essentially this muscle is involved in everything and most of the things that imply you to move away from the floor.
It's also known as the punching muscle. So a lot of times you will see that people in martial arts have it really developed because it's the muscle that they use for strengthening the punch. So that is these muscles that you will feel here underneath the height of your armpit, on the side, the muscles that you will feel there, they need to develop the strength to push away from the floor.
And they're very subtle because they're not big. No. So they're very difficult to engage unless you really put your focus there. And we will see after a little bit more about it. Talking about the neck, one thing that is very interesting for me is the sternocleidomastoid, that is the muscle that you have here that actually stretches. So what it means, and I see it a lot in class, that when you're in arm balance, you are not looking down. You're actually stretching the front of your throat, let's say. And this one implies that you are lengthening through the chin. So just remember also when we will go and we will practice more on our mat, where are you looking and what actually are you stretching when it comes to your neck. Speaking about the arms, I mean, what is not going on into the arms when we are in arm balance, I guess. So infraspinatus, teres minor, all these small muscles that are also on top of the shoulder. Pectoralis major, so the big pectoral muscle. And then you have tricep, deltoids, everything, bicep, that are also, this one is very interesting because deltoid, biceps, and the bronchioles are like engaged and stretched. So, and indeed, your flexors. So your hands, your fingers, all this muscle that actually kind of allow you to grip the mat, you hear it a lot in class, grip the mat, are all placed into your forearms, and all these muscles have to be engaged, with exception for the extensor carpal ulnaris muscle, that is the one that you stretch probably prior to an arm balance, that is running inside. Now, this is like a little bit eye level muscle, so you heard a lot of things when we sing about like arm balance, we think strength, strength, but where? Arm strength, really? Everything is involved. It's a big lift from the ground, so you must think about a full lift. And also our brain is involved. So when we look about arm balances, and in this case like crane and crow, the cerebellum is activated. So the cerebellum is responsible for our memory, for our balance, so the shift into the balance, muscle coordination in complex patterns, therefore arm balance. So this one is very good at it's not just physical exercise, it's also like
it's also brain training.
It's also brain work.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is a little bit more an anatomical level, and for the one that will join in our course, Mastering of Arm Balance, you will get way more of this information. But starting with our crow pose. So what we need? Blocks, we said, the bolster, and we spoke before about the strap. So strap has pros and cons. So the pros of the strap is that keep your arms in check. So normally you would place the strap across here to avoid your elbows to move out. What happens in reality in your arm balance is that you want to squeeze the elbows together, and if you have a strap, you will rely on your strap to avoid the arms out. So essentially you will not squeeze in, you will just lean against the tension of the stretch. So if you use a if you use a strap to keep your elbows in check, please keep it soft so that it stays and kind of lays on top of your tricep without being your tricep pushing against the strap.
The reason why we do this is because we want to have our hands down, and we want to have, in a sense, our triceps pulling in, so we get that internal rotation into the arms. And what that happens with is to create a close chain between the arms and the pectoral muscle. So we really create that close chain by squeezing everything in as we push away from the floor. This will create stabilization into your arm balance. What happens a lot of times in class, and what we see a lot of people do, is bring the arms more out. Now, this is not a bad thing per se, because it creates more balance. And we want to find a better line between balance and stabilization. So balance feels a lot of times more safe for most people, but we want to eventually create much more stabilization, and the balance will come. So that is why with that strap, it will prevent you from opening them up wide, but what ends up happening is we keep pushing into the strap, so we're actually pressing the strap out because we're searching for that balance. So why she says to keep the strap loose is because, in a sense, we want to create that stabilization why the strap will stay around the arms but very loose, so you don't feel you're pushing against the strap. The strap is just a tool, and eventually, of course, we want to do this all without a strap around our arms.
You want to lose at a certain point the props. Okay, so now that we know what are our needed props, we can start to look at Kakasana and Bakasana and the different variation we have. So when we look about Kakasana, crow pose, variation we have is knees outside of the elbow, elbows bent, knees outside of the, on top of the tricep, elbows bend, and knees on top of the elbows bend. When we want to perform Bakasana, crane pose, the elbows are straight, so it's a different pose, and the knees go into your armpit. We will go and dive into it after we have a little bit more clarity around crow pose and Kakasana. All of these are expression of the pose, so they come with pro and cons. For example, knees outside of the elbows, the pros are for beginners, so you can start there. And it's a way for you to get what Patrick was saying, balance, and start to get more clear what is the concept of balance before you start really to strike for stability.
And that will be the first one that we show after. So the knees outside of the arms or triceps is a very good way to begin and to learn your very first arm balance. So especially if you have never been on your hands before doing any arm balance, the first one to learn is this type of Kakasana, because here you will find a lot more stability, balance, and you will feel that you don't need to engage as much and you don't need as much strength yet as in the other versions. So this one is much more accessible and is a great way to start also get over the fear of coming onto your hands and lifting yourself up from the floor.
Exactly. What can be a little bit a cons of it is that you will need to engage your adductor and squeeze your adductor a little bit more. You still squeeze your adductor and lift from your core in the other expression, but here probably you will do it to avoid sliding down. This is one. The other one we will perform is like bringing the knee on top of your tricep, keeping the elbows, I would say, like in a more soft bend. So this kind of variation is sometimes like taught. Personally, I see a lot of people that do it in this way, they kind of bruise themselves at the end of the story. Because if you don't have the right amount of engagement and really this huge lift, you will end up to sit on top of your tricep. I understand why we do it, because triceps are soft.
You get a lot more grip for your knees. It feels a little bit easier to lift yourself up. And a lot of times a little bit of bruising comes because we don't have so much engagement into the body yet. So actually we lean our knees into the soft part, which gives us an easier balance. But over time can also cause a little bit of a painful hang and sometimes some bruising to some people.
Yeah, and then the last one that probably would be our preferred way to cue your Kakasana is knees to elbow to knees actually. So my teacher used to call it key and socket. So thinking about your elbow to be a key and your knee to be the socket. We will go into after how this stuff work. But this kind of expression as a pro is that gives you stability, gives you ability for transition. So you can switch positioning while you are there and request way more soft engagement. So you are not like super tense to stay there. You can actually kind of relax from time to time.
Once you unlock the stability into that pose, you will feel that you can also there be pretty relaxed inside. You have a little bit less balance, but as soon as you create the stability for yourself, you will see that equals out. The benefit from there is that there is where we can start to work later on with more advanced arm balances as one-legged crow and different variations and transitions from our arm balance.
Yeah, coming in and out from it. And this one is for Kakasana. So I think we can start to work and then we will move towards Bakasana.
All right.
So we will start with the first one.
Yes.
So for that one, we grab, I will move a little bit back that Patrick can show you. And we grab the bolster also. So
yes. So the bolster that we place here in front of us, the only thing why we have it here is to take away a little bit of the fear of falling onto our face. So we will not have any other purpose than it be there for your own sake of safety, that you feel that you can lean maybe a little bit more, because a lot of times what happens with any arm balance that we do, and especially if you're new to any arm balance and you start with crow, the fear is actually the part that keeps us usually from actually lifting up. So when we take away the fear of falling onto our face, we actually can do much more than we think, and maybe you can already do the Kakasana without you knowing it, just because the fear holding you back. So that's why we place the bolster in front of us.
Before we start with demoing and for you to learn the different expression, if you're new to this practice, please be mindful with your wrist. So every time do some kind of wrist warm-ups. This is something that we will go way more deep into the course. But now, like if you are a yoga practitioner, like you should have a little bit of general understanding of which kind of warm-up you can do for the wrist. Wrist at the beginning might feel like quite a difficult place, I would say, to be, in terms we don't move in that way that frequently. But with time, you will notice you will develop stronger wrist. Now, for this...
One other thing. One thing that we will do with our hands, and what is another thing that a lot of times is a little bit a misconception what people do, is that we need to really lean towards our fingers in any arm balance that we do. So when we have our hands down, we want to lift our butt up, but we don't want to have the weight hanging in the back of our hands into our wrist, because what happens a lot of times is that is the reason why your butt will slide back, because you have all the weight hanging back. In any arm balance that we do, we want to lean more forward in towards the fingers. So the fingers are gripping and we want to have all the knuckles pressing down. If you lean forward and your fingertips are going to turn wide, that is when you have the good grip. If this middle part starts to flatten and this starts to lift up, all the weight is still into your wrist. So also for a more strong feeling into your arm balance, feel that you really can have the fingers in a soft spread. So don't spread them too wide, but have them in a sense spreading super wide. Relax, that is your grip. The relaxed part of your hands, place them down and really grip with the fingers into the floor so that you can lean more forward into your hands.
When we move upside down, hands become our feet. I never saw somebody walking on heels, so you should not be walking on your wrist. So that can be like also if you don't bring the weight, like Patrick said, on top of the fingers, so you don't feel that your fingers are turning wide. So you find what is called hasta bandha, so suction cup into the palm. First knuckle onto the floor. At the beginning would be a little bit difficult for you to press this part onto the floor, but more you do, more will happen. This one will alleviate the wrist pressure and the bearing from the wrist. That is first thing that people lament when they start this practice. All right, so bolster it's here. We will use a block for this. So Patrick will start to bring himself on top of a block and bringing his hand like underneath his shoulder. So the idea is to have the hands shoulder width apart or slightly wider, I would say, but start to really have the hands under the shoulder, get used to this kind of dynamics. And he wants to kind of pretty squat down, because here we are not lifting them much. So he will start to come on top of his toes, on top of the block, and he start to lean slightly forward. Remember, stretching of the chin, so we look forward. And by doing this, he start to bend the elbows as he leans. He start maybe to bring one heel towards the buttocks, eventually maybe both of them. And as you see, if you see, he's squeezing his knees outside of his tricep. And he's keep lengthening and lifting from the back, protracting the shoulders, and then eventually bring yourself down. So as you see, it's not that high compared to other expression, because we are kind of sitting more back and the elbows are more bent. So if you don't mind, Patrick, also to show from another take so that you can see also from the side and from the front. Yes. So we will start from the front now. So again, place a block under your feet. The reason here is to support you to go into your arm balance and make it easier to lift part of your body up.
And also, if it's easier for you, if the hands straight feel a little bit off, feel free to bring the hands also slightly angled out. And as I lean forward, I also squeeze a little bit the knees in, so that prevents me also from turning the elbows out and having my knees and my legs slide off.
So starting by here, you see like he's bending his elbow back, like if you do into your chaturanga. And he's protracting his shoulder. So imagine a vector coming from the shoulder separating and pushing the back of the spine up. And he's keeping a very nice intense squeeze into his thighs, so that ductor work.
Yes,
so this one can be your first entry. My recommendation, our recommendation is like to try all of them and in general like assess which one you want to be your favorite way to enter
and
when you are in class.
And now I lift my feet up at the beginning. If you're still getting used to this, you don't need to get your feet up from the block. So you can still also feel how it is to just lean forward, to gaze forward, and maybe just stay there. And then come back until you get the confidence. And then maybe become light on the toes, maybe still having the big toes down. As you come back, as you progressively start to lift your feet up from the block.
So the idea is like start to learn to bring weight into the hands. So do what you need to get some kind of familiarity with that. So we lose the bolster, but you don't have to lose the bolster.
Yeah, you can keep it there all the time. We just take it away to make some space here on the mat.
So fear is an important thing to take care when we are doing this kind of asana. So yeah, you can keep it in front of you. So we will enter in the second version, the one that I told you, like probably is the one that bruises you the most. And I see it a lot of my students say, I'm doing this, I'm getting bruised here and there. Yeah, essentially like you are seeking for balance, but maybe there is no stability yet there.
All right.
So I will go into this version, and this version we can call it like, I say, also with the block, we can call it knees to tricep. Personally, like, it's one of my least favorite versions because I have very bony legs, so I really feel it into my tricep, but you know, it's one that is out there. So maybe you discover is your favorite one instead. So I will still step on top of my blocks. So, and if you see, I'm bringing my knees onto my tricep.
Yeah, and what she tries to do here, in a sense, with this type of kakasana, is to lift the knees onto the tricep, or even if you have the space, higher, depending on the compression that you can bring into the hip. At the beginning, when you're still also using the block, it helps you to bring the hips a little bit higher. If with one block it still feels a little bit off, always know that you can even place 2 or more to bring yourself a little bit higher. So here you still need to bring a little bit more of a balance into the arm. So here you see she lifts, she keeps pushing, and at the same time she has the gaze forward. The triceps are pulling in, the knees are in a sense relaxing onto her triceps. But if you don't want to have a little bit of bruising, you still have to lift a little bit more from the back. Point the toes for aesthetic points, and then just slowly you can lower again back down. So again, all these poses are shapes. They have also an aesthetic to them, and pointing the toes is partly aesthetic, but at the same time, what we said before, it helps you also to flex. So notice also when you do this, because it's very easy to keep the feet a little bit relaxed because you're engaging so many muscles through your body, as you've seen before, that a lot of times we forget the feet. And that is a common thing that we see a lot, that the feet are a little bit floppy. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't enter into your kakasana. The difference is just that you're a little bit less engaged. And every time when you practice, every time when you go into your kakasanas, like Ellie was showing, you want to be as engaged as you can, so that every time you're really working the whole body and the mind at the same time to create the shape and this upwards lift.
And to create the sensation, to feel lifting. Of course, you can always pause the class. This is the benefit of being online. And you can try at your own time to enter a couple of times. We are here for whenever you want to start again, to move on to the next shape. Yeah. That is our favorite one.
The one that we do the most when we talk about kakasana, and that is that key and socket position. So as she was saying before, what we want to do is to have our knee and our elbow in a similar line. So this will become the shape that you are in.
So the key and socket sometimes can be hard because you have to, it's very hard between brackets to identify the socket, right? If you extend your leg forward, Patrick is short, so you will lose a little bit that little socket that is created, a little opening that is created at the moment that you bend the knee, and you will feel that there is a little bit of a dip into your knee, and that's where is the socket for your key. The key is the elbow. When you start to when you start to prepare yourself for your arm balance into this way, you want to make sure that your elbow and your tibia tuberosity, that is this part, are in line. Because this one will give you stability and potentially will also help you to stack. You want to kind of find a little bit of stacking so that you can relax into. And also, if you want to transition in more powerful asana from here, you don't need to gaze out into your crow pose. You can gaze out in another asana.
Yeah. And the hard thing here when we start is to have really the elbow on and like pulling it into that space.
Yeah.
And the hard part is as soon as you start to come up, you have a little bit less of a surface where you are staying on. So that is why a lot of people, even when they think they have elbow to knee, they still find that they are a little bit more on the tricep, just with the arms more bent, just because of that stability point that we were talking about. So it makes it a little bit harder at the beginning to stabilize, but once you start to get that feeling where it needs to be and you get that point of elbow into that knee socket, that is when you start to get again that control, and it becomes light because the bones stack on top of each other. And when the bones are stacked, things become lighter than when it's more shifted, and again it's pointing and it's pushing into the soft parts of your muscles.
So this one will ask you a little bit more time and searching, and at the beginning will feel maybe a little bit more unstable if you're used to place your knee onto your tricep. At the end of the story, when you kind of nail that sweet spot, it would feel way more stable, and actually you can, between brackets, chill there even like quite an amount of time. So let's go there.
So I will do this next one.
Yeah.
So again, I will use that same block. I will use the two angles again so that you guys can see.
Oh yeah.
And of course, eventually when you do them more, you don't need to use the block anymore. But it helps a lot, and especially if you do many reps, to keep your hips higher and not tiring out too fast. Especially when we're also still working a little bit on that strength part of our arm balancing.
And you can try for yourself, as we are demoing this different variation, how it is for you to demo it without and with. So as you replicate this posture, try with and without the block, and see how it changes your perception of the pose. So we start to find that little socket for our key. So if you see Patrick, how is it now? He's a little bit lower, his knees were a little bit lower compared to mine, and he's keeping really the knee in contact with the elbow. As you notice, his hips are higher maybe, just because he's more comfortable here. And then coming down.
Yeah. So this is the part where you want to start to feel a little bit that space with knee and elbow. So here just experiment, and it's the same thing like what we did before. I lifted both feet up at the same time, but of course you can take little baby steps to get a little bit more comfortable into this pose. And also notice when you start to feel that your elbows or your knees start to lose contact, just come back down, settle them back in, place your hands first, start to find that space with the knees towards the elbows, and notice that you're not turning them out.
Yes.
So every time when we a lot of times see that people don't get this little detail of the elbow and the knee, is because actually every time we start to forget to wrap the triceps in. And when we wrap the triceps in, it actually locks pretty quick and you look forward. So don't look back towards your feet, don't look down between your hands, start to look forward. When we look forward, again, like what I said at the beginning, we start to shift more towards the fingers. And when we shift more towards the fingers, I don't even need to lift the feet because they start to become light.
And if you would be here, like looking at Patrick's fingers, they're pretty white because he's pressing through his finger. And his feet can be also a little bit more relaxed.
And that is the point that we try to make, that it starts to become not that heavy to stay here. And that is the point that you want to find. You want to find balance, stabilization, and the shift with the gaze and the hands to find that balance point. Once you find that balance point, you will start to feel that you naturally start to lift up.
Yeah, correct. So you see the different variation. And honestly, like if you try all of them, you will notice that you will lean towards one specifically. The question for you is always why you go for that. Is because you feel more stable, because maybe you have more support, more meat to lean against to, or like you want to find transitions. So you lean to the one that at the moment feels a little bit more difficult, but at the same time will give you more in the long run. Patrick stressed it a lot of times through this masterclass today, this wrapping of the elbows. So this is an incredible thing that gets lost most of the time because of our little friends here, the serratus anterior, and all the things that you need to wrap and push, but also can be something that you face difficulties, even like through your dolphin pose or other things.
Another way to see that I will show you is actually to see it from the front side. So you will see the difference if my elbows are flaring out or if I really wrap them in, especially for this version of Kakasana.
Yeah.
So if I come onto the toes and I stay right in front of you, I place my elbows, my hands down. And if my elbows are more out here, which happens a lot because we are so focused on planting the knees and my elbows are out here,
they will open to the side.
They will start to open to the side, and you get a lot of times what people get is that the knee slides simply off. So again, as soon as you plant your hands before coming up, don't mind so much about the lift. Feel first to close this chain into the body. So we're really wrapping. So you see the eyes of my elbows are not turning here. They're turning more to the front. So they're facing more towards you, towards the camera. So that when I bend the elbows, I actually get that sharper part of the elbow linking towards my side where my knees are going to be. Then as I wrap them, then I can place the knees on top, lean and gaze forward. And then as the weight is in my fingers, I can start to lift my feet and then slowly lower them down and then sit back. So this is a really important part that is very easy to miss because we're so eager to lift up. You have all the time. Plant the hands, wrap the elbows in, press the floor away, bend through the elbows, then place the knees and feel that they lock into each other before lifting the feet.
Yeah. And if I can add just a little thing that could be a test that sometimes we also say is like if you're really into this position of heel socket, so elbows to knee, really like nice and stuck together, you can start to test your own stability by shifting weight sometimes, like bringing one knee on one side and leaning there and alternate. So theoretically, this kind of positioning of the knees should enable you to do it with relative difficulty. So this one is also a nice indicator. And what I mean with that is that if I am in this position, where maybe I should place myself to the front. So when I bring my knee and on top of my elbow, so I am in this knee and socket position here, and I can lift, I actually can shift, right? Because there is nice contact and stability there. So I can bring my leg in and can be a nice exercise for endurance into this pose. All right, and now that you have a little bit more understanding of your crow pose, your Kakasana, is time to speak about Bakasana, the crane pose. So when we look about Bakasana, we say straight arms.
Yes, straight arm strength versus Kakasana, bent arm strength. That is the major difference between the two.
What we need for our Bakasana is definitely more wrist flexibility and more wrist strength. So my suggestion would be for you, if you're still working on your Kakasana, use Kakasana as essentially conditioning for Bakasana. So use the experience of your Kakasana to start to build the proprioception into your fingers and also the strength into your wrist.
Because the big thing, especially for our wrist with Bakasana, is that we cannot rely on having our body leaning like in the other poses with the knees outside, where you can in a sense hang, relax the feet and not have the full body engaged. With Bakasana, with the straight arms, the whole body needs to be engaged because you don't have anywhere that you can lean on. So you really rely on this full closed chain. So there it is very important that you have everything down from closing in the arms, having this closed circuit of energy of lift going through the entire body, strong serratus anterior, strong back muscles, and feeling comfortable that your fingers and wrists can hold your whole body weight up without having the bent elbows where the knees can relax, and that you have a little bit more division of the weight.
Essentially is less about stacking and more about building your own lift from ground up. So core there, big part, but all the muscles together, they will create this uplifting sensation. All right, so for our Bakasana, we need four blocks.
We will use 3 blocks, I think, this time, but you can use 4, especially with crane. The point is that Eli could show it with 1, but the point is that maybe for you, you want to use 2. You will maybe show it with 2 for the first time. but it is to get that knee lift as high as you can, maybe all the way up towards your armpit. So you want to get that lift as high as you can, so that you can keep the arms straight and have the hips up high directly.
So I will take 3 blocks, 2 for my hands and 1 for my feet actually. So I will start with this one. So I will use 1 block under my feet, and I want to use, actually there are 2 things you can do. If you're using blocks, you can also bring the fingers down onto your blocks as you lift, because this one will provide a little bit more grip to your hands. At the end of the story, you start to experiment with this pose. Doesn't have to be perfect at the beginning. It's just also to learn how you move in space.
And the reason why we do this before, and that is because we speak a lot again about our wrist and our finger strength, is that this makes it a lot easier to lean forward with straight arms than when we have the hands flat, and it comes a lot more into the wrist and the grip of the fingers. So by practicing crane with straight arms, if you're beginning, having the hands maybe around and gripping the block gives you more space to flex into the wrist than when you have the hands completely flat.
So for this I can kind of bring my...
And you turn them out into a V shape. So again, this is also the other thing that we did in the first one, that I told you that the hands don't need to be straight, they can also turn slightly out. Also the flexion in the wrist is easier when it's a little bit sideways. Here I have more flexion into my wrist than when I have it with a straight hand. So this is harder than when I have it slightly sideways, and I can bend easier my wrist. And again, that releases a little bit the tension and maybe strain on your wrists.
Right, so from here I will kind of step on top of my block. Now, I want to bring my 2 blocks pretty close by. The reason is because more I move forward with my blocks, more my wrist has to flex.
And also her whole body has to lift up towards there. So you want to bring everything close in, maybe even having the blocks touching the block that she stands on if you have that space.
Yeah. So I will start almost like in a forward fold, if you wish.
Yes, it's almost a standing forward fold, and you want, as you see, she keeps the arms straight from the get-go. So she doesn't go with bent arms and then straighten them out. That is much harder because you need a full more strength from your upper body. So keep your arms straight as you lean forward, and then you bring the knees as high as you can get. So maybe they don't all the way come towards your armpits, maybe they stay a little bit more towards your tricep. Wherever they go, start to lean forward into the hands and really push through that whole back line. Maybe stay on the toes. If you have that space and you feel, you can tap one down, maybe lift the other, or just lift both of them if you feel comfortable with the straight arms.
And maybe lay, fall out. So as you notice, I felt a little bit more forward because my weight is way more forward. So if this one happens to you while you're there, it's also a possibility, so don't get discouraged of it.
Yes, because what happens a lot of times is that as soon as people start to come forward to go towards the straight arms, and when they lean forward, is that they a lot of times bend the elbows before. You want to really try, like what Ellie was showing, so to keep the arms straight, to lean before lifting the legs up and coming back down. It's much harder when the elbows are slightly bent and you come with bent elbows, and then you need to straighten them all the way up. This is a much harder work for your back line, your serratus anterior. So if you don't have the strength yet, feel really that directly from the get-go. If you practice full crane, Bakasana, straight arms all the way. If you feel anything in your wrist, come down and just slowly rotate the wrist a little bit. Always take care of the joints. If they get too sore, you get too much painful, stop for today, maybe continue tomorrow, or take a couple days rest before you do it again.
So we can do exactly what we did right now with 2 blocks. So placing 2 blocks under the feet. So this one will feel with 2 blocks. With 2 blocks will feel a little bit more scary because we are lifting ourselves even higher. So again, this one is just experimenting and trying out things. So it doesn't have to feel perfect. It doesn't have to go perfect on the first go, but it's just to experience. And also, if you probably notice yourself, if you're practicing with us, as we demo, so you pause and you do, you notice that this one requires way more engagement of your body. So felt like less comfortable, right? So same. Pretty high here. So as you see, for me to bring now the The knees on my armpit is way easier. So I'm leaning forward and I'm start to look forward. So again, I try to lift the feet from the blocks, keeping my elbows straight and staying here. And then eventually when I'm done, I can land the feet down, maybe sit on top of the blocks. So this one is another variation that will help you to elevate so that you don't have to work that much to find your own lift, because the lift is provided by blocks.
Yes. And the transition in the future, that if you become really good and strong in these positions, then this is the one eventually that will be able to lift you up into a handstand from your arm balance, or from handstand down into the straight arm Bakasana crane pose.
Exactly. So this one is really relevant for this type of transition. Now, Patrick also showed you without blocks. Maybe we can show it another time without blocks. All these things with blocks are merely and purely to help you to bring your hips higher.
Yes.
But indeed, if you want, the hips can lift.
Yes.
By themselves.
And again, the same thing. So I will show it this time maybe towards the front of the camera one time, or a little bit sideways. Maybe I take a little bit of angle that's a little bit different than what you've seen before. Again, once you come in here, you want to have the arms down. And again, notice also that you can bring the fingers slightly out if that helps. For this time, I will keep them straight so that you can see like what is like a full version. And you want to directly extend through the arms, wrap the triceps again. So again, keep remembering, closing the line, creating that energy lift, pushing the floor away, lifting the knees as high as you can. Maybe come onto the tippy toes, bring the knees maybe towards the armpits or triceps. Gaze forward, so don't look back again towards your toes, look forward. Once you look forward, you can lean, go towards the fingers, really have a strong grip, and then start to lift one foot and maybe the other.
And if you see here, Patrick is really trying to push himself all the way up, so he's using the strength of his back.
Because I can even take my knees off.
So he's using the strength of his back, of his core, to creating this pull, this energy. I always like to think when there are arm balance or inversion, like kind of like an energy
that is lifting,
vertigo that is lifting all the way up. So you have an energy where that is lifting all the way up. So it creates also for you this intention into the practice of your arm balance to feel lift, instead to sit down. Because a lot of times when we have this kind of arm balance, we see like people are like just moving towards the ground, where the intention is really moving away.
Lifting up.
All right, so I think for today, for this masterclass on Bakasana, so the crane pose, now we know it's crane, we got a little bit more than just Bakasana. We learned a little bit more than just that.
Yes, and you want to find progression through all the steps that we went through. So if it's the first time you do arm balancing, forget about the crane that we were doing now for now. Focus on first getting your first Kakasana, getting the knees outside, starting to create that lift. Once you create that lift, maybe the elbows, the knees can come onto the triceps to find a little bit more lift, a little bit more engagement. Then the elbow and knee key and lock, where we find that we can find our transitions from in our last Kakasana pose, into the crane eventually, where we feel that we need the most strength into our body.
And if you find the crane is still not accessible for you, remember, indeed, those little conditioning exercise we were speaking, shifting weight so that you develop that kind of proprioception. One good thing to do is always filming yourself, because maybe if you're attempting Bakasana, you think your arms are straight, but they're not. So be like really mindful in terms that filming is not bad. It actually is witnessing progression and is witnessing how your body moves so that you can register into your brain. And for us, is always a very good meter to assess where we are. So film yourself. Don't forget also to share with us if you wanted to share with us to have some kind of support into your practice. You can tag us, you can share it through Instagram, and we are always happy to help you there. Another good thing that we would like to share with you, so this one is the first masterclass before the inauguration of our platform. So for everybody that is here into this masterclass and showed interest, they will have a special offer on our course when it comes to arm balance. So stay tuned.
Yes, because in that one we will go through a lot of different arm balancing. So there you can explore much more, and we will go much more into detail, and also how to get more of these varieties of arm balancing that all stem from learning crow pose as we progress through our lifetime of arm balance practice.
Yes, and thank you again